What's up, everyone? If you have not watched the previous video in this series, I suggest you go back and start at the first one. In this video, we will be talking about some of the questions you can expect from the United States Probation when they're conducting their interview with you. Before the initial interview, you should anticipate the probation officer to become acquainted with the case. Before the initial encounter, the probation officer interacted with the prosecuting attorney, reviewed the criminal history, and met with the victims. Consider both positive and negative outcomes that might impact the report. You should think about how you will respond to the following questions before meeting with the probation officer. First, let's look at some of the background questions that you will be asked. Who are the most influential people in your life? Describe your family in a few words. What part of the country did you grow up in? How would you characterize that area? How long have you been at this address? Have you ever lived anywhere else? Tell me about every city you've ever lived in. No, seriously. Give an overview of your present living conditions. What were the circumstances of your previous living situations? The probation officer attempts to obtain information about early life impacts by asking such questions. Consider how your replies could cause you to deviate from the established sentencing guideline ranges. Moving on to family questions, you'll get such questions as, tell me about your parents and siblings, if you have any. Where do your relatives live? If you were to characterize your parents in one word, what would it be? What kind of job do your parents have? Did your family have a history of domestic strife while growing up? Can you tell me about your relationship with your parents? Do your parents have any knowledge about your current situation? How would you say that your parents feel about your current situation? Will you be able to meet with your parents for an interview? Do you have a close relationship with your siblings? Would you be available for an interview with your siblings? What is your spouse's name? What is your spouse's age? How is your relationship right now? What are your children's names? What are your children's ages? Do you work with any social service organizations? Learn how your replies to questions might cause long-term problems. Information about the defendant's familial ties or commitments, for example, may persuade the probation officer to believe that the defendant could afford to pay a large fine, or it could impact where the BOP sends you initially. When assessing how much money to confiscate from the defendant's commissary account each month, the BOP will undoubtedly consider such issues. In the same way, family issues might justify requesting a reduction in sentencing recommendations. We advise our clients to consider the implications of each response since they will have long-term consequences. The next set of questions to think about will be in regards to your health and physical body. Questions like, please tell me whether you have any tattoos or scars. What do you think those tattoos mean to you? Can you tell me about any severe medical issues you've had in the past? When did you get your diagnosis? What was the name of the attending doctor? Do you have any current medical conditions? How do you want to proceed with your treatment? Do you use any medications? Describe any health issues you're dealing with. How would you characterize your overall physical state? Describe any medical issues that may affect your ability to work. Defendants should keep in mind that the BOP staff workers use the PSI as a reference for classifying individuals. If a person can document health issues in the PSI, he will have an increased chance for obtaining proper treatment while in detention. However, don't count on it. The BOP is not known for their great medical care. Furthermore, information recorded in this area may impact the prison where you serve your sentence, the housing unit to which you're allocated, and the work assignment you obtain while incarcerated. Not only that, but consider how getting your health issues documented now might make the presentation of, say, a compassionate release request possible in the future, or obtaining early release with the CARES Act. Every response has the potential to have long-term consequences. But if you plan on applying for compassionate release at your halfway mark of sentence completion, then you will want all issues, including past cigarette smoking, obesity, asthma, or any other negative health issues documented at that time. Questions regarding your emotional and mental health will also be asked. These questions include: describe the characteristics of your personality, positive and negative. Tell me about any mental or emotional issues you've had in the past. Do you think your family has a history of mental or emotional problems? Have you ever sought help for a mental or emotional issue? What was the diagnosis you received as a result of the treatment? Have you taken any antidepressant medication? Can you tell me whether you've attempted suicide before? How would you rate your mental or emotional well-being? We encourage our clients to react to such queries with the utmost caution. Again, prison officials will rely on the PSI document for the remainder of the term. Even though your emotions may be at an all-time low following conviction, it's critical that you not furnish the probation officer with material that might indicate emotional instability. Such paperwork might be used by the Bureau of Prison officials and future probation officers to force you to participate in so-called therapy programs that would exacerbate your adjustment. These are not therapy programs like you're used to or you're thinking of. You'll be in a room with many people who have real issues and may even be civilly committed, like they're never getting out. Not only that, but being put on suicide watch while in BOP custody is seriously no fun. I've seen people exacerbate and overstate issues they were having, and as a result got much more than they bargained for. Questions about substance abuse will also come, such as: tell me whether you've ever had a problem with drugs or alcohol. When did you first start using drugs? Would you say you've abused drugs regularly? How much did your drug problem set you back financially? What kind of drugs have you taken in the past? When was the last time you used an illegal substance? Can you tell me about previous medical treatment you've had? Does your family have a history of substance abuse? We urge our clients to consider the consequences of their responses to the questions we just listed. Only one program exists in the federal system that can reduce sentences, and does so on a regular basis. The answers to these questions significantly impact whether a defendant is eligible for the 12-month early release from custody by completing the RDAP program. Don't be startled if the federal probation officer wants a urine sample from you when you're not in detention during the pre-sentence investigation. Questions about educational, vocational training, and special abilities will be among the lines of the following questions. Where did you go to school? What is your educational background? Have you ever had any professional training? Do you have any current licenses? What languages are you fluent in? What is your current job situation? Have you been in this role for a long time? How much money do you make? Is your present legal condition known to your employer? How would your boss react if I asked them about you? Will you be able to resume your previous job? If you're a business owner, how long do you think your company will last if you're incarcerated? Have you ever served in the military? We want our clients to understand how the criminal justice system's personnel will read their replies to these inquiries. According to the literature on criminal justice, there's a link between work, education, and recidivism. The more education, training, and work experience a person has, the less likely they are to participate in criminal activities in the future. Therefore, you want all the certificates you've ever earned documented, along with any extra education that you've had, even if it's not in a formal school setting, or you don't have a degree to prove it. As a result, defendants who demonstrate a dedication to education improve their chances of a good outcome. At the same time, claims regarding employment can impact later on in the process when prison officials decide whether a halfway house placement is necessary. The correct balance should be struck in the responses. Furthermore, all people who anticipate serving time should know that getting the maximum good time credit is contingent on an individual's capacity to demonstrate that he has achieved either a high school diploma or a GED. If he or she hasn't, officials will force them to enroll in a program that will lead to a high school equivalent diploma. Some individuals demonstrate a university diploma, but not a high school diploma. As a result, BOP officials demand that that person take GED lessons. Those who can prove that they have a high school certificate in the PSI will escape certain administrative headaches in prison. I know people personally who have graduated from college and high school but couldn't prove the latter and were forced to take the GED program in federal prison. Questions regarding your monetary situation will typically be formed like this. Have you included your assets, liabilities, net worth, monthly cost, and cash flow in your financial statement? What is the best way to verify the financial facts you provide? Do you have the financial means to pay a fine or restitution? How would you rate your assets concerning your sources of income? How would you define the relationship between your income and your expenses? Have you ever attempted to hide an asset? Have you ever attempted to transfer assets out of your name recently? People should be aware of the ramifications of whatever response they provide, because many authorities will analyze them skeptically. All replies should be consistent. When people examine all of the repercussions of their responses to financial inquiries during the pre-sentence inquiry, they're well prepared. US Probation may request the following information from other people you know. How would you characterize the accused? How is your relationship with the defendant going? How has the defendant's crime affected your relationship with the defendant? What impact has the defendant's crime had on your family? Do you have any information about the defendant's substance abuse? Do you have any information about the defendant's mental health? How would you characterize the defendant's violent tendencies? Do you have any information regarding the defendant's financial situation? How has the defendant's crime affected the family's financial situation? How will the defendant's incarceration affect the family? What information about the defendant would you wish the court to have? Defendants should expect the probation officer to ask the United States Attorney the following questions. Has the defendant been cooperative with the authorities? Has the defendant made any attempts to hinder the investigation? Should we take into account any aggravating or mitigating factors? Is there anything in the plea deal that the defense contests? Are you aware of any other jurisdictions looking into the defendant? In this scenario, who is the victim? How can I get in touch with the victim? How much money has been lost in this case? Even if there was no loss, what loss exposure was feasible in this case? Was there any money recovered from the loss? How much money did the defendant make off this crime? How much money did the defendant hope to make off this crime? Do you have any of the defendant's personal or corporate financial statements? How much of a role do you think the defendant played in the crime? How long has the defendant been part of this crime? How and when did the government start its investigation of the defendant? How did the defendant respond at the time of the arrest? How has the defendant adjusted during the pretrial supervision? Has the defendant made any efforts to repay the victims or make restitution? Has the defendant engaged in any programs that the court would want to know about? What do we know about the defendant's criminal history? What do we know about the defendant's history of bail jumping? Does any documentation exist about the defendant's involvement in domestic violence? Does any documentation exist to suggest sexual misconduct? What allegations exist about the defendant's use of weapons? Does the defendant have any ties to gangs or organized crime? Do we know of any threats the defendant has made against government officials? In the next video, we will be discussing the anatomy of a PSR after the PSI has been conducted. In any case, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. Keep learning, growing, and staying safe.